Hello and welcome back to another episode of Majlis and Markets with your host Hassan Javraj. In this podcast, we bring you insightful conversations with influential leaders in Islamic and global markets. As usual, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to us. Get in touch with us also by sending us an email at hassan@majlisandmarkets.com and be sure to follow us on LinkedIn. Today, we're looking at fintech in Egypt. Egypt is rapidly becoming a major tech and fintech hub in MENA and Africa. With over 100 million people, many of them young and tech savvy, and a strategic location connecting continents, the country is set for impressive growth. But the path forward isn't without its challenges. Egypt faces regulatory hurdles, market fragmentation, and infrastructure issues that could slow its progress. To explore these issues, we're joined by Walid Hassouna, founder and CEO of Value, and a leader in Egypt's financial sector. With his deep experience in banking, and now fintech, Walid shares key insights into the opportunities and obstacles shaping Egypt's fintech landscape. Walid Hassouna, welcome to Majlis and Markets. Great to have you here.
Thank you, Hassan. Real pleasure.
Walid, it's really a pleasure to connect with you after 11 years. I think you were one of the first people I ever met when I was becoming a journalist. Many years ago, we met at the Euromoney Islamic Finance Conference in London. I don't know if you remember, but you were really kind to me in telling me about the Islamic finance market and about Egypt as well. And I'm really fascinated to see what you've been doing over the past couple of years, especially now that you've pivoted more to the tech and the fintech. But before we get into that, Walid, could you give our listeners your background story, and how you got into fintech and how you got into banking?
Yes. So I graduated from business school here in Egypt, and then I had my MBA or Master's Business Administration in 2022 from J. Mac Robinson College of Business, which is part of Georgia State University. I've been working in banking my entire life. With the exception, of course, of my pivot to fintech. So I've started my career in HSBC, and I used to be a dealer in the dealing room. And then I moved to corporate banking and structured finance, worked for a couple of banks, Societe Generale, then worked for Bank Misr and Bank Audi. In Bank Audi, I made another pivot in 2012, and I started doing Islamic finance transactions. That was very new to the Egyptian market, despite the fact that most of Islamic banks started in Egypt, but no one was really interested in structured finance, project finance. So I've made a couple of deals in istisna, ijara موصوفة بالذمة. So I've done a lot of project finance. Luckily enough, we got a lot of awards at this time. And then in 2016, I moved again into investment banking. I worked as the debt capital market head for EFG Holding, which is the biggest investment bank in our region, whether in North Africa or in GCC. And during this also, I used to head their MBFI platform. And we started a consumer finance company at this time called Value. In 2022, I decided to resign from everything I'm doing with EFG after Amazon investment in Value, and started to work only on Value as the founder and the CEO.
Fantastic. You've got mashallah, you've got a really great career, and I really want to unpack the fintech part. But Walid, you said you started off in banking. What was it like starting off in banking? Was this in the early 2000s or the late 90s when you started?
I started actually in 1999. And I started as a dealer in the dealing room in HSBC. By the way, at this time in Egypt, it was not called the HSBC, it was called the Egyptian British Bank, because it was co-owned by Egyptian businessmen. And then I moved into corporate banking, which I really liked. I spent most of my career doing debt structures, and mostly on transactions that are very big, whether it's an M&A, LBOs and MBOs, and then project financing too. And I was lucky enough at this point in time, because in 2003 up to 2010, Egypt was actually growing very fast on new projects. We had made a lot of new greenfield projects, and they all required financing. So I remember that we've been doing fertilizers plants like crazy. We've done like 12 at this time. Luckily enough, I was the lead banker on most of those transactions. We have done also a lot of transactions in the petrochemicals. We have done a lot of transactions in sugar manufacturing. And in 2011, just after the revolution, most of my deals were with private equity doing acquisitions in the Egyptian market. I've financed most of the acquisitions of the M&A transactions that happened between 2008 and 2016. So banking has been a very good ride for me. And finally, I joined EFG to run their debt part. EFG was not very big in debt, despite the fact they are the biggest until now in the equity capital markets. But debt capital markets were not their cup of tea. We started the debt capital market practice, and we have grown this to be the biggest player in Egypt and in UAE in debt capital market transactions.
And Walid, you mentioned like your studies abroad. Like, did you work abroad at all, or was this all in Egypt, your banking career?
Actually, I worked abroad, but I didn't work as a banker or a financial analyst. But during my couple of years in Georgia, I used to work as a light jockey. So I used to work in a very different thing, because in Egypt at this time, I also owned a company in the entertainment field. And I was very passionate about lighting. So I've done a lot of concerts and things like that as a light jockey.
Great. And did you notice like a difference in the work culture between, say, like Egypt and the US? Obviously, culture-wise, it was different, but work-wise, was it different or easier or harder?
I think the US is a great place to learn. It is very diversified. You meet people from everywhere. My class in the masters was full of foreigners coming from India, from Turkey, from Pakistan, from Europe. So this was one thing that is really remarkable, because we have a great exposure to different countries and different cultures. Also, the US is a very dynamic market, so it gives you you grow older in the US, because you see a lot of different things that normally we don't see in smaller countries where I come from. So definitely it was very helpful. It was eye opener, and I believe it was the best one of the best experiences I've ever had in my life.
Fantastic. And then Walid, you pivoted from traditional banking or bricks and mortar banking to the fintech in 2016, I think you said.
Yes.
Why did you decide to do that?
It was by luck. So when EFG asked me to join as part of their executive committee and to be responsible for debt capital market and MBFI, they wanted to build a consumer finance company. And luckily enough, at this time, the debt market for consumers was very weak in Egypt. It was only depending on banks and a few companies that were using very traditional methods. I wanted to disrupt this market, and for the first time, we were able to launch an instant approval of credit to our customers through an app. Once we have done this, it opened up a new world for us. We didn't know that we are going to venture into fintech. We were thinking about the customer experience, but not thinking about how tech was a good enabler to us. But we have used a lot of tech tools, and between day and night, I found myself as one of the people that they call pioneered fintech in Egypt, along with very big names that I'm happy that people would see me part of this group. Because in 2016, 2017, the only players that were in fintech in Egypt was Fawry. And the other player was PayMob, and then Value came in. And most of the players in the fintech, even in the region, were concerned more with payments. And this was the first lending fintech actually in North Africa and GCC in 2017 when we launched. And then it became like everyone is talking about fintech. We've seen a lot of verticals of fintech growing in the market. But I think the Fawry, the PayMob, and Value were actually the pioneers in that, and it opened up for a lot of other players to come in, whether in Egypt or the region. And I had a very good, I have an excellent passion for fintech, because as a banker, you are under a lot of governance, a lot of regulations and everything. Fintech would give you some room to try new things, try new technologies, try more with more focus on the customer rather than on the institution itself. And we were very successful in our beginning, and then we are even more successful now. The only issue is because of our success, a lot of companies are currently competing with us, whether in Egypt or the region. But it remains to be something that I'm really happy doing it, especially in the B2C space.
Fantastic. And Walid, you mentioned about fintech in Egypt. One thing I want to get from you, and I've talked to a few other entrepreneurs and investors, is that Egypt's a big market. We understand it's the biggest population in the Arab world, and it's a big country in Egypt, in Africa as well, and in the world. But what makes Egypt a very attractive place as a fintech hub or as a tech ecosystem?
There are multiple reasons. The first reason is being exposed to other regulators in other markets around us. We have the most flexible regulator when it comes to North Africa and GCC. Of course, when compared to Africa, we become a heavily regulated environment. But compared to North Africa and the Middle East, definitely the regulators have a lot of depth. They are willing to try new things. They are happy that people would come and disrupt the market. Not like other markets here. Other markets here, they would like everyone to get licensed first. And normally fintech players, they don't want to go for a license because there is no very clear path for them. We've been facing this in Jordan, for example. Our model is not licensed in Jordan, but we're not able to operate. In Egypt, we were able to operate even without a license because there was nothing saying it's a no-go. So normally in Egypt, people ask for forgiveness, as we say in tech market. People would ask for forgiveness, but not for permission. This is one thing. So the depth of the Central Bank of Egypt and the Financial Regulatory Authority and their flexibility with new companies has helped a lot this to become a very good hub to try things. This is one thing. Second thing is it's a very big market with a lot of unbanked population. So fintech is really needed. Customers really need fintech. And I think the reason why fintech has grown in Egypt is not because of the fintech part, but actually because of the tech part. So people have been using a lot of tech companies in the Egyptian market, whether they are Egypt-based, Egyptian-based, or even foreign companies or international companies like Uber. So when people started using Uber, Careem, and other players, they were okay to start using those tech apps for the purpose of their financial needs. In Egypt now, you can see 42 lending companies that are using an app. You can see a lot of Rosca models in Egypt, people like Money Fellows and Jam'iyya and others. You can see even there is a new company that is building a great infrastructure for remittance. So as you see, there is a very big market. Banks are not able to serve the unbanked population. The cost of serving the unbanked population is so expensive in Egypt, given that we have more than 100 million of population. So this is another pillar that makes Egypt a very good market, even to try things out because of the regulator and the size of the market and the absence of banks for certain segments. The third thing is we have a lot of talent, especially in banking and tech. So when you look at fintech is actually banking, but it is like more advanced, more progressive. But you need bankers anyway. You need bankers to understand the product, to understand the financials behind the product. And I can claim we have the best bankers in the region. And if you look at Saudi, look at UAE, look at even Iraq, you will find most of the banks are run by Egyptians. So definitely this is something that we have very good banking people. And on the other hand, we have a lot of tech people that are able to do things in a shorter time. They know what we call in Egypt, they know the shortest way of doing things. So definitely having the talent plus the unbanked population plus the depth of the market in Egypt allows Egypt to be the fintech hub for the region. And currently, most of the fintech players that are in Saudi and UAE, their back office, their programmers, their engineers are sitting here in Egypt like 10 kilometers away from my office where I'm speaking to you right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was actually on the phone to my bank a few days ago, and the back office was actually in Egypt as well. And I got talking to the customer service representative there, and he was telling me like how there's a lot of like international companies basing themselves in Egypt, and the people in the back office are based in Egypt. But one thing I wanted to ask you, Walid, is that you've talked about fintech and its emergence and its rise so far. How have the incumbent banks or the incumbent players dealt with fintech? Have they done their own thing, or are they trying to like compete in other areas?
So it's really very, very different. So actually, banks did not have a certain way of reacting to fintech. So it depends on the bank and its policy. So there are banks that see fintech as a competition, and they are trying to launch products that will definitely compete with those fintech companies, or they're trying to build in-house fintech companies to compete with fintech. And this is one way of doing it. We have not seen much success in that, but we have seen a lot of tries. And I think it's good because it enriches the market and make it even more deep. So those are one kind of banks. The other kind of banks that thought that they are very small, and if they partner with fintech, fintech will allow them to have market exposure and penetration. So we work with few banks here in Egypt that we help them reach out to the customers. We do underwriting as a service for some banks. We do offloading of our portfolio to banks that has a small retail portfolio, but they still want to grow the retail portfolio. We offload our clients to those banks. And finally, there are banks that are interested actually not only in cooperating with us, even if they are big banks, but they are interested in lending us money. So this is one of the things that is very rare to find in the world, that banks are willing to lend money to fintech, especially in the lending scheme, because this is actually pure competition. You are lending money to your competition. But because the depth of our MBFI market in Egypt, we were able to raise more than $200 million of debt from Egyptian banks. And in Egyptian terms, these are 10 billion Egyptian pounds. That's a very big figure. And the banks are happy with us because our default rates are very low. We are very punctual in our payment. And it gives them like a wholesale market, because rather than having a million customers, like the million customers we have currently in Egypt, it's easier for them to finance those million customers indirectly, make money on that, and leave us to take the risk of default of those customers.
And in terms of the cost, Walid, from the customer's perspective, is it pari passu, or is it a little bit more than going down to your traditional like Bank Misr or NBE?
Definitely, we're more expensive because actually we use banks' money to lend. So we cannot collect any deposits, as you know. In Egypt, there is no way to collect deposits unless you are a regulated bank, and there are no licenses for regulated banks. Maybe the entry point would be for digital banks, that they started with a new law for digital banks that was issued last year. We might see the first digital bank coming out early next year, hopefully. But as we speak, the current situation is, unfortunately, we're not able to collect deposits from our customers, and accordingly, our cost will always be higher than the banks. What we're trying to do is to try to give the customers a faster onboarding process, more convenience, more transparency in their financial transactions, and we couple this with some blended offers of zero interest and other things to make sure that we remain very attractive to our customers. In terms of figures, I can comfortably say we are currently, if we compare our product to a credit card, for example, we would be the bank number 3 or 4 in Egypt. So definitely we have already cracked this model and made sure that our model is very attractive to our customers, that we have grown our portfolio more than 1 million customers right now, which put us comfortably number 3 or 4 from a size of credit card portfolio in Egypt, with the highest ENRs. ENRs means the balances that are being used by those customers.
And Walid, is this like traditional lending? Like, say, if you want to borrow like $1,000 worth of Egyptian pounds, you want to buy something, or is it like a buy now, pay later, or is it like a structured finance? How does it work with you guys?
Actually, we started as a buy now, pay later, and then we discovered that buy now, pay later will always be an issue because it's a zero interest game. And the problem with zero interest is that your only way of making money is to take a rebate from the merchant or a kickback from the merchants. So when we have seen this, we started developing more into consumer finance. And by consumer finance is we still have our buy now, pay later product up to 5 or 6 months. And after that, we're going to charge you interest. The good thing about this, that it gives you a balance and a blend of different revenue streams. And if you look at a firm, for example, today, or Klarna, or even Tabia and Tamara in Saudi, they are trying to venture out of buy now, pay. They're trying to use buy now, pay later for acquiring customers, and then they are trying to venturing into other business. I think yesterday there was two big news in Saudi. The first big news was Tamara trying to get a consumer finance license, which is what we have done 5 years ago. And Tabi acquired Tawiq, which is a wallet. So buy now, pay later is not enough for anyone to make money. We have seen the fall of Klarna in the valuation and their new pivot into banking. And we have seen the fall of Affirm in the valuation and Afterpay, because as the world had a lot of inflation waves after COVID, and those inflation waves make the cost of lending customers very high. So a zero interest all the time would never work.
And Waleed, your customers, are they mainly young people, and are they also in like metropolitan areas like Cairo and Alexandria, or are they across the country?
So when we started, we were targeting actually 30 plus customers, 30 plus in age customers, Cairo, Giza, and Alexandria. Now, 40% of our customer base is totally unbanked and live outside Cairo, Egypt, and Alexandria. Cairo, Giza, and Alexandria. And this is very important, because if you're not able to crack the unbanked market, there is no room to grow. You're competing with banks, and you just said banks are cheaper in their pricing to the customers. So for us to grow, we had to have an unbanked portfolio. Currently, out of our million customers, we have like 300,000 that are totally unbanked. They never dealt with a bank before. They never got a loan from any institution before. They don't have any data available on their credit bureau. And this is how we are able to have a sustainable model, because we reach out to customers that banks are not interested in, because their cost of operation is so high, and getting those customers for small tickets will never work.
Running a fintech in a country like Egypt, there's a lot of people, a lot of international or regional venture capital investors are looking at countries like, say, Saudi, the UAE, or Bahrain. Is there a lot of like regional and international VCs looking at Egypt, or do you think they need to come more into the country?
So definitely, since our, Egypt had its own economic crisis in 2022, and we had massive devaluation for our currency, and this is a big reason why the flow of funds into Egypt has decreased significantly. And the reason is because most of those investors and VCs, their investment is in US dollar, and it's very critical for them to come in at a US dollar of 16 pounds and try to exit when the US dollar is at 100 pounds or 50 pounds. So definitely we have seen a lot of investments coming in 2019, 2020, 2021, and then we have not seen much investment in 2022 and 2023 and 2024. Despite the fact the recent reports are saying that Egypt on the fintech was the number one in the region last half, but this was because one transaction with Highland, M&T Highland, that was $180 million. So definitely this is not the right assumption to say that Egypt attracted in the first half most of the investments coming into fintech because it was only for one company. So definitely there is a little appetite from current VCs and current PEs into the Egyptian market, and they are becoming very picky on where they want to invest their money. So I think this is going to stabilize again in 2025 when everyone knows that this is the fair pricing of the US dollar, and accordingly they will be able to reinvest in the Egyptian market. But we have a lot of the VCs that already invested and are already have a long position on Egypt since 2019, 2020, 2021. And these are like Tiger, Sequoia, everyone has portfolio companies here in Egypt.
And are they coming in like pre-seed, seed, or like Series A or beyond that?
So most of the investment that comes to fintech in Egypt historically was in the pre-seed, seed, and Series A. And this is most of the investment that has been done. It was being done mainly by 500 startups, plug and play, Y Combinator, and other players. And then there are some very few fintechs that were able to raise money from Tiger, Sequoia, and other big players own Series A and Series B. But currently, most of the investment coming, with the exception of M&T Haaland, is coming at the seed and pre-seed level. Those are very small tickets that we can see right now.
Fantastic. And then, Walid, you mentioned about the broader economy. We've had a few podcasts talking about Egypt's economy, but you know, being Egyptian and living there yourself and running a company there and having been a banker in Egypt, how would you characterize the current state of the economy of Egypt right now?
So it's very difficult right now in Egypt because the interest rates are so high, and we need to keep those interest rates high because we're competing with Argentina and Turkey on hot money. So definitely the interest rates are very high. Tomorrow there is an MPC meeting by the central bank to decide whether they keep interest as is or increase it. My assumption is it's going to stay as is, but currently the interest rate, the benchmark for interest rate is called corridor in Egypt, and the corridor is around 29%, which is so expensive. So it makes business in Egypt very difficult right now because you need to make a return higher than 30% to make money on the funds that you're borrowing. On the other hand, I still believe in the market here because of its depth, because of its ability to survive. So Egypt survived 2011 revolution, 2013 revolution, COVID, and economic crisis of the past 2 years. We're still here in Egypt. There is much investment. Most of the investment is going to real estate, unfortunately. It's going to real estate development. But because of the real estate development, other feeding industries are working very well. We have seen also great moves from Samsung, from Xiaomi, from other players that started producing their appliances and their phones and tablets here in Egypt because of the inability of us to import fully finished products. Also, we have seen some new car manufacturing companies that are moving into Egypt. So I think in the near future, things are going to stabilize. Hopefully, we come back to the era of 2005, 2010, where we were one notch down from being an investment grade company. But and now, at least, I can say comfortably, Egypt is a safe place to invest right now, which was not the case in the past 2 years.
Yeah, I think there have been struggles over the past couple of years. I think one of the big things, and you and I spoke about this even a decade ago, was about the debt situation. I think the interest Egypt was paying on some of its debts was really high, right? They borrowed a lot between, say, 2013 and 2019 before the pandemic.
Yes, that's true. And now it's being reduced a little bit by a little bit. And because of the Ras Al Hikma transaction that came with $35 billion into acquiring real estate area on our north coast, I think there will be another couple of transactions like that. Also, the government has been very cautious now in tapping the markets of debt market. We have not seen any transaction this year. So definitely everyone is aware of how difficult the situation is and about the external debt levels. And it has been moving down a bit by bit as we speak.
What about the role of countries like, obviously the USA has been a very prominent player in Egypt for trade-wise, but what about countries like China and India? These are Egypt trying to diversify their trade relations?
I think this is happening right now. There is a lot of investments coming from China and India in the market. There's also a lot of investments coming from Turkey in the market. Actually, we had political issues with Turkey after 2013 that has been resolved right now. As of today, I think our president is meeting the president of Turkey in Istanbul today. So there is a lot of diversification. It's very important because counting only on the US as support put us under a lot of political pressure. So diversification is very important. And as you well know, the other camp on the other side, like Russia, China, and India, are interested to invest in Egypt for multiple reasons. And for us, it's very important to balance our relationship with the US, Europe, and the other camp.
Walid, as we bring the podcast to a close shortly, there's just two areas I wanted to talk to you about. The first, I think, is very, it probably affects you on a day-to-day and other Egyptians as well, is climate. There's been very extreme heat, not just in Egypt, but in other countries as well. I think I was reading an article in one of the newspapers, international newspapers, and they were talking about how Egypt had to cut electricity for a certain number of hours in order to save money. How important is it to think about as an entrepreneur and as an Egyptian yourself, how is it like? How important is it to think about these kind of climate risks when doing day-to-day stuff?
So we know that we had some problems that are currently a lot less. So within the climate, within the heat issue, we had a problem with the US dollar because we have to import a lot of gas and fuel to be able to run our electricity system. But currently, there is again a new wave of increase in renewables. We had a couple of renewables initiatives in actually 2016 and 2015 that paid back right now, because in the absence of this feed-in tariff program for renewables, we would have faced even a more severe condition in Egypt. And there is another wave of renewables that's happening. Given the stabilization of our US dollar, we've been able to avoid power cuts in the past few months. And I believe this will continue for the next few phases of our, for the next few months. And hopefully we will be able to retain our gas production after we pay off the partners like Shell and BP and everyone their dues on the gas. And I think this is like mostly solved right now, to be very honest. And I think in the next few months we'll not be facing any issues like that again, because we have learned our lesson very well on selling gas cheap.
And how does it affect you? Like, does it affect you day to day, these power outages?
Unfortunately, there were some effects, but we've taken like some measures. We have a lot of generators in our offices and our in our branches. We have also used a lot of green energy to make sure that we stay up and running. So definitely, it cost us some money, but it did not interrupt our operations.
Fantastic. Waleed, given your background in Islamic finance, and you and I met at the Islamic Finance Conference, Euromoney Islamic Finance Conference, way back in 2013. I just wanted to spend a few minutes talking about Islamic finance in Egypt. You've mentioned about Egypt's history of Islamic finance. We can talk about Nidghamar in 1950s, and we can talk about other the big Sharia scholars who are Egyptian, and Egypt has a very prominent place in Islamic finance, as I mentioned. But it seems to me Islamic finance is still a very small part of Egypt's financial ecosystem. Like, what do you think? How would you characterize right now Islamic finance place in Egypt's economy?
Okay, so I think the best time for Islamic finance was between 2011 and 2013, because it was tied with political change that happened in Egypt at this point in time. From a political point of view, definitely, I was not one of the supporters of the Muslim Brotherhood taking charge in Egypt, because they had their own agenda, regardless of Islamic finance or not, but they had their own agenda. Now, like 10 years later, everyone is looking at Islamic finance right now in a very neutral matter. In 2011, 2013, it was very political. And accordingly, when 2013 revolution occurred, everyone was trying to avoid Islamic finance because it was going to couple it with any political agenda. But now I think there is a lot of improvement in that. More Islamic banks are operating in Egypt. This week, I believe AUB, which is Ahli United Bank, has changed its traditional banking into Sharia compliant banking after the acquisition that happened from the Kuwaiti investment house or the Kuwaiti financial house. I'm not sure the right name is. And also, we have seen a lot of growth that's happening from the progressive banks here in Egypt, progressive Islamic banks like Adib and other players. So definitely there is a movement. We've also had an ETF that is Sharia compliant for the first time, that is currently being in the process of roadshow and subscription. I think this is going to be launched like next week. It's being done by Beltone Capital, which is a big investment bank here in Egypt. So there is a lot of movement now that is not pressured by any political thing. So I think the potential of growth of Islamic banking in Egypt and Islamic finance is growing. We have seen some competition for us that are working on Sharia compliant contracts because they want to have sukuk as a method of finance. The country has issued sukuk and will issue sukuk again. So definitely, I think the next period of time is going to be very promising for Islamic finance and Islamic banking after decoupling it from any political views or political groups.
And do you think Islamic finance can help Egypt's economic diversification and development?
I think it's very important. Most of the people in Egypt are Muslims, and they really appreciate Islamic finance products. And it's definitely a market that has a lot of potential to grow. On the other hand, a lot of the investors in our region would like to have Sharia compliant structures to be able to invest. So definitely, Islamic finance definitely will benefit the market here in Egypt. And it's much needed, whether for the consumers, for the public sector, for private sector, and even for investors who want to invest in Egyptian debt market. And they cannot go and buy treasury bills and treasury bonds, but they were happy to do this as sukuk. Also, Islamic finance has a lot of flexibility when it comes to project financing, especially project financing, as you well know. So I think this is something very important for us to actually push and work hard on. And I've seen a lot of movement in this space right now.
Fantastic. Walid, tell us more about your current projects and any upcoming projects you may be working on.
Yeah, of course. So, we acquired Paynas, which is a payroll company, a fintech payroll company in 2022. And we've been growing this business. And on the other hand, we have been also working very hard on investing in some of the smaller companies here in fintech that actually complements our offering. We do minority investments, so not do a big investment yet. Our current plans is to try to open up in Jordan. We submitted for a license in Jordan, and we're actually looking currently at Iraq as a new market for us. We're also looking at Morocco and Tunisia. So those are the markets that we are focusing on right now. I think next year we'll have another market up and running. Our interest is usually in markets that we believe we are able to compete and leverage our experience in. So you will see us avoiding Saudi, avoiding UAE, avoiding Kuwait, avoiding saturated markets. We're trying to capture markets that other players in the region would think they are a small market for them to operate. But we believe if we add up all those small markets together, we will be a good target for an acquisition from one of the players in the region or worldwide.
Fantastic. And Walid, how can people find out about Value?
So the best thing to find out about Value is our Facebook page and our LinkedIn page. Mm-hmm. Our website is actually a B2C website, so it focuses on customers. I'm happy that anyone can follow my LinkedIn. It's Walid Hassoula, and our Facebook and our LinkedIn page is available. Happy to receive questions and happy to receive feedback on our product from your listeners.
Yeah, I'll link it in the show notes. If you send it to me after the conversation, I'll link the Value and also to your LinkedIn page. But
sure.
Walid Hassoula, this has been a fantastic conversation. It's really great to catch up with you after all of these years. And thanks again for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Hassan. This was a real pleasure. And yet it was like 11 years later, but better late than never.
Exactly. Thanks a lot, Walid. Take care.